Доброе утро, коллеги. Как видите, для нас 9 часов утра это рано. Вот, поэтому все наши спикеры собираются. К сожалению, вот Александра Окунева пока что нет. 4 часа утра он мне прислал сообщение, что он вылетает из Симферополя, постарается быть. Поэтому это Минэкономразвития. Все работают изо всех сил, это нормально, будем надеяться. Поэтому позвольте нам открыть наш круглый стол, который в этом году посвящен формированию инвестиционного климата на рынке недвижимости в условиях экономического спада. Мы все профессионалы, понимаем, что экономическая ситуация очень сложная. Наше правительство, которое вчера почти в полном составе экономический блок выступал на первом дне конференции, речь шла о том, что, по всей видимости, будет еще хуже. Прогнозируют нам чуть ли не 98-й год. Поэтому нужно мобилизоваться, по всей видимости, нам и постараться выжить на нашем сложном рынке недвижимости, который, в общем-то, всегда чувствует проблемы в экономической сфере несколько с задержкой. Надо сказать, что вот кризис 2008 года показал довольно странную картину, потому что вот у нас мы ведем большую работу по повышению квалификации, обучению на факультете экономики недвижимости наших представителей этого рынка, и мы опосредованно почувствовали кризис и неплатежей с оттяжкой примерно на полгода. Вот. И, по всей видимости, это некая закономерность, вот специалисты по этому поводу выскажутся, на рынке недвижимости. Поэтому сейчас только что я слушала Бизнес ФМ, и речь идет о 35% спаде на рынке, и с этим нужно жить и понимать, что эта ситуация не сиюминутная. И поэтому вопросы привлечения финансовых ресурсов на рынок на сегодняшний день, по всей видимости, самые острые. Поэтому я предлагаю в спокойном таком режиме профессиональном провести дискуссию на эту тему, подумать. Может быть, мы что-то придумаем, может быть, мы сможем что-то предложить рынку. Поэтому позвольте мне открыть наш круглый стол и предложить слово Мартину Вермелину, директору РИКС по Европе, России и СНГ, и он поделится своим опытом привлечения международных финансовых ресурсов на рынке недвижимости. Прошу вас.
Thank you very much. Is it on? Yeah. Good. And does it work? Oh, it works. Thank you. First of all, good morning to all of you. We had a little bit of a slow start, but that's due to the weather, and I'm still very pleased with the number of people that are here today. I will talk about cross-border investing in real estate during economic times of downturn. And before I start, I would like to say thank you very much for having me here today. I know the Gadar Forum is a very important and impressive forum in Russia, and I'm very pleased to be here today and to represent RICS. Also, when talking about this topic, looking at my previous life, I had to deal with crisis and I had to deal with investments cross-border. So this topic is close to my heart, and therefore I'm very pleased to talk about it. Because time is limited, because I can talk for hours on this topic, I restrict myself to the core of what I would like to say. Again, my name is Maarten Vermeulen, and I'm the Regional Managing Director of RICS in Europe, Russia, and CIS. What am I going to discuss today? First of all, the focus. I'm not going to talk about the whole of the investment market in the world. I'm going to focus on direct real estate. I will talk about investing in real estate, the pros and cons. Why do you want to invest cross-border? What kind of criteria do you hold when you are going to invest cross-border? And what is happening during economic downturn and how should you react upon that. Looking at the focus for today, like I said before, there's a broad range of opportunities. You can invest in real estate. You've got direct real estate, you've got indirect real estate. You can invest in private companies, but you can also invest in public companies. Today, I'm going to focus on the left-hand side of the slide, direct real estate, private and real assets. So no indirect real estate, no funds, only direct real estate investments. And when you look at that, it's very important to think about, okay, why, shall I wait for a while? Good morning. Everybody is here, okay, cool. Michael, good morning. Good morning. Hello. Okay, to continue. When you invest in real estate, it's always good to start thinking again, to start at the beginning. What are the pros and cons, again, of investing in direct real estate? And in general, despite the cons, there's always a lot of reasons why you should invest in direct real estate. And I've listed them on the left-hand side of the slide. First of all, it's about diversification. You can diverse your portfolio and therefore spread your risk. In general, real estate provides for a stable income stream. You get on a monthly or a quarterly basis, you get income from the rent. And today, certainly today, it's favorable in terms of risk and return. It also offers a reasonable protection against inflation because usually your contracts are indexed. And you can create more return via specialized management as you have opportunities to add value to real estate. And of course, you can also seek for specific opportunities in international property markets. And sometimes there's also tax advantages. Again, there are also negatives to investing in direct real estate, and they are listed on the right-hand side of the slide. But again, they don't outweigh the positives, the pros. And then the question, of course, why should I invest cross-border? Primarily, after doing some research, it's basically about two things. First of all, to create more return enhancement, seeking premiums to the domestic market. Sometimes your own domestic market is too small, or you've invested already too much, and therefore you have to go somewhere else. Or maybe the market in your home market is not good enough, and therefore you have to seek for opportunities somewhere else. And the second thing, and that ties in with what I said on the previous slide, risk minimization, seeking diversity away from limited or inefficiently priced domestic product. But then again, if you start to consider, if you want to invest cross-border, you need to bear in mind that there is also a risk premium. Because if you go cross-border, you don't know about the language, you don't know about the culture, you have to learn a lot about legal issues and other things that tie in with investing in real estate. And therefore, you have to be very, very well prepared. And again, because it's a different market, it's a different situation, you're not familiar, therefore you have to add a risk premium to your risk management profile. And that risk premium is quite often based on a couple of criteria. But the first question you have to ask yourself is, do I actually want to invest in this country or not? And that ties in with what I call the investment universe. And the questions you have to ask yourselves is, what's the situation when it comes to voice and accountability? The political stability in a specific country, the government effectiveness, regulatory quality, the rule of law, and control of corruption. Because if this is not in order, if you face issues in this segment, it's very, very hard to properly invest and to be able to invest and make a justified return. But then again, if you've decided, okay, I want to invest in this country, you're going to think about strategic allocation, what I call quantitative modeling. It's about real estate fundamentals, the market size, the yields that you can achieve, the rent rates, but also about macro indicators, GDP growth, unemployment, population, and urbanization growth. And of course, risk factors in terms of tax and legal and politics. The second step that you take after that is what I call the tactical allocation. It's about real estate market cycles, credit environment, sector diversification, what kind of opportunities do you have, investment style diversification, and talent pool of partners. Because also, it's very important to bear in mind that if you go cross-border, it's always very, very important to have a solid and trustworthy partner. You can't do it on your own. From my days in investing in real estate, cross-border, I always searched for partners, people that I could trust and that helped me finding the right way and finding the right deals. Talking a little bit more about diversification, you can diversify via geographical spread, sector spread, style, and number of assets. And style, again, is important to highlight. We identify core, core plus, value add, and opportunistic. And in general, if you invest in core real estate, you have low risk, so that's the grade A property streets or shopping streets, but also a low return. And if you invest in opportunistic real estate, you have a lot of risk, but potentially also a very, very high return. Okay, and then economic downturn. What are you going to do? And I think there are three possible strategies. First of all, defensive, fear or forced. You want to get out of the property as soon as possible and potentially also with a substantial loss. You can take an offensive approach, opportunistic, and say, hey, this is interesting, this market is in downturn, property prices are pretty low, it's for me a good time to invest. But you have to have, well, guts in order to do that. And you can, of course, also say, well, it's business as usual. Crises come and go, and therefore we have to react and act upon those crises according to the situation. If you think about these three strategies, there's no ultimate truth. And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. It will be a little bit of all of three strategies. But everybody will suffer in times of crisis. And again, depending on your risk profile, your type of clients, you have to decide what is the best possible strategy for you. Accept and anticipate on a mean variance yield correction. That's, I think, the most important thing to say. And if you want to invest in times of economic downturn in markets that face crisis, and you have to sell the product of real estate, you can tell it's about cash is king products. Real estate always generates cash, and therefore it's very important. Also in the mix for investors. A selection of strong fundamental markets, a variety of new investment products, and smaller, less complex deals. That's how you can sell real estate in times of economic downturn. In conclusion, and this is actually based on my own experience, don't panic. Don't start to scream or shy away. Deal with the situation the way it is. Because the world changes, and in line with that, the property investment market will change too. But that's normal, and that's being called evolution. But changes are different per country, per sector, per town, per family, per person. And change will continue to come back at ever faster and ever more intense. And therefore, the only thing you can do is basically to prepare yourself for that, to prepare your organization for that. And therefore, it is all about market confidence. Every market, no matter if you talk about the Western world, about Russia, the Americas, or Asia, every market will face every now and then its crisis. And therefore, you have to have confidence in the underlying fundamentals. But also, as a result from leadership in that specific market, execution power. How can you deal with issues at hand? It has to deal with in-depth knowledge, transparency, and also integrity of the market. And of course, in times of economic crisis, economic downturn, there needs to be a specific focus on operational excellence. You have to be lean and mean, product leadership, innovation and sustainability, and customer intimacy, knowing what your customer wants, the investor, the tenant, but also the consumer. And moreover, as an organization, but also as a person, you have to be alert, flexible, agile, realistic, and of course, don't be too greedy. Wait for your chances. This is what I would like to share with you today, given the time and also given the other speakers, but I'm happy to take any questions if needed.
Where do you see pockets of opportunities, pockets of possible growth?
In Russia. Yeah, that's difficult because I'm not investing anymore on a daily basis. But what I do see is that in the past, we used to say, okay, we're going to invest, for example, in logistics in Russia because that makes sense. But you can't say that anymore these days. So it's really about cherry-picking opportunities that you see, because maybe for Moscow, the logistic market can be very good, but it doesn't have to be the case for St. Petersburg. So you have to look for opportunities at specific locations. So you have to have much more detailed knowledge about specific local submarkets. So it gets more complex.
Спасибо, Марк. Мы хотим еще подискутировать о том, что доложил нам Мартин. Может быть, есть вопросы?
Thank you.
So any more questions to Martin? Probably have questions. Martin?
For us, for mobility today, what some practice case.
What is exactly your question?
Question is, what your recommendation for us now? Like a practice, what do you recommend for us for investigation, for investment, for yes, in real estate sector?
I think what I tried to do in my presentation.
В моем выступлении я попытался прежде всего сказать вам, почему важно инвестировать непосредственно в недвижимость. Я описал, какие критерии, которые важны при выборе, чтобы выбрать правильный рынок. Особенно это касается международных инвесторов. Вот я говорил о вселенной для инвестиций. И сегодня во время дискуссии при открытии форума мы говорили о доверии, отсутствии коррупции и других, и регулировании. И если вы правильно подойдете к этим вопросам, все будет хорошо. И кроме того, необходимо учитывать следующее. Необходимо гарантировать, что у вас есть лидерство, знания, прозрачность на рынке, доверие к рынку. И опять же, надо быть бдительным и гибким, быть готовым к изменениям, потому что изменения будут происходить быстрее, чем вы думаете, чем это было раньше. Людям не нравятся изменения. Очень трудно жить в такой ситуации. Но вот основные рекомендации, главные рекомендации, которые я могу вам дать.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Спасибо, Мартин. Да, пожалуйста.
Thank you, Martin. Yes, please. Let's look at the curve of prices of Russian real estate. Normally, we have the so-called head and shoulders figure, and it means that the prices go down right to the level from which the growth started. So I would like to know what you think about the prospects of this traditional market of real estate. Normally it happens in all segments.
Нам кто-то поможет с переводом для...
Can someone help with the translation for Martin? Yes, please.
О ценах на российскую недвижимость сформирована фигура технического анализа, которая называется по-русски «голова и плечи», ну, по-английски «head and shoulders».
Normally, the market goes to the place where the rising trend goes. The potential decline totals from 50 to 80%. Martin, so what is your view on the prospects of the Russian market strategically?
Again, I'm not investing on a daily basis anymore, so I'm not looking at the markets on a regular basis as such. But my personal opinion is that looking at Russia, it's still a market with a lot of very interesting opportunities. Yes, there is a crisis right now, and yes, a lot of people will shy away from this market. But like I said before, people should come back because this market is too big to ignore. It offers good returns. That's proven in the past. And from that perspective, I think it should be, in any case, in everybody's globally or international investment case.
Извиняюсь за некоторое злоупотребление.
Well, probably I abuse my asking questions, but since the Russian market is too young, let's look now at the Japanese market, especially in the period after 1992. Do you think it is similar to the current Russian market, the Japanese market at the time of back 1991 and the current Russian market? Are they similar in a way?
Well, an interesting question, but I've never studied the Japanese market, so I can't answer that. I've only been involved in Europe and Russia in the past.
Спасибо. Спасибо.
Thanks a lot for your question. Thank you. И у меня есть еще очень краткий вопрос. А вот если мы рассмотрим рынок недвижимости Великобритании, look at the market of the UK in the period of early 80s. Microphone, please. Please use the microphone. There was a very big decline. There was a considerable decline in the UK market of real estate in the 80s. So probably you don't know, you have not studied Japanese market, but what about the UK market? What happened then?
I don't know exactly what your question is, but the thing is, if you invest in real estate, it's per definition long term. And what I'm trying to say is that you shouldn't shy away from a market as soon as there is a crisis. It depends, of course, on your strategy, on your type of clients that you facilitate and serve. But the fact is that also in times of economic crisis, the market offers significant opportunities. And people have become very, very rich by investing at that moment in time, anti-cyclical. And therefore, from my perspective, I think if you have the money, if you have the time, and if you have the guts to do it, I think you shouldn't shy away from markets that are in economic downturn. And that also counts for the UK, because markets will come back in the end.
And let me supplement Martin's reply. Mr. Histanov is a leading market analyst and the securities analyst. And the securities that were related to real estate have changed since the 80s. The current securities can't be compared to the securities that were issued back in 1990s in the bubble period. And the securitization is different too. To some extent, I think the general head and shoulders model will persist and it will be recurring. But as to risks, I'm sure that the risks will sufficiently go down because people will try to have some guarantees to minimize their risks. And this concerns both Russian and overseas investors. And this applies to mortgage-backed securities too. And So most likely your question applied to this issue. Thank you. Thank you too. Now let's go on with our discussion. And let me give the floor to Elio de Anna, President of European School of Economics from Italy. Please represent your view on the economy of the exit from the crisis.
Good morning to everybody. As the lady said, I am Italian, founder and president of the European School of Economics. Very special school. Why did I create a school of business? I am a philosopher, writer, businessman, musician, and more than anything, I am a dreamer. And I don't know if I can help, this meeting on the real estate to have more success. I tell you, I created 6 centers of the European School of Economics in Europe, United States, and I believe one day in Russia. And I wanted a very special school that could dedicate time and resources to the individual. The individual is the most significant thing on earth. And we have to invest all that we have and all that we are on dreamers. Only individuals can dream. Masses cannot dream. Masses have to be guided. And individuals have to create. Now, to tell you about the real estate, I can tell you that all the centers of the European School of Economics are in a very beautiful building. In New York, we are our landlord is Mr. Trump, who is running for president right now. And he's a #1 man, probably, in New York as a business man in the real estate. In Florence, Rome, Milan, we are in the most beautiful places. Florence is a 15th century building. And in London, we are in Mayfair. And just to tell you that I really believe that people who study for business, they have to be influenced by good impressions. They have to study where the style is, taste, beauty. And this is very important for students. I want just to contribute to the real essays, to tell you which was the push, which was the very idea that pushed me to create something in the business where you know it's a very difficult field. And I tell you that the most important thing, most important realization was it that the world that we touch and see is just a world of effect. And what we really have to realize is that we cannot conquer anything in the outer world if we don't dedicate sometimes to something that we neglected for so many years, which is an inner world, the world of creativity, the world of beauty, the world of victory. And this is something that no school, no university can teach you, because we believe that that is a very intimate, private world where no one should access. And I tell you, that is the world of causes, the world where we really can do. And this is my realization. I discover that there is a world that can really move things outside ourselves, can really change things in the outer world. If you touch this world within yourself, you will see that you will never happen in any war, disaster, or whatever the media are telling you. If you really touch the inner world of causes, you will see that you can move mountains in the world of events. Now, I was listening to Martin talking about how important it is to be confident and to trust yourself, and I tell you that whatever you want to do in life, you have to touch and conquer this inner world, which is the main thing in your life. And it's I read about the program of the meeting, and they tell you about the Russia and the world. And I tell you that Russia is a beautiful place. Russians are incredible people. I have many students coming from Moscow and from St. Petersburg, from St. Petersburg. And they are incredible people, special people. And the reason they chose the European School of Economics is because we have a very strong philosophy. The philosophy is, and the motto of the school is visibilia ex visibilibus. From the invisible, we can create the visible. The visible, what we touch and see, is just a product of the vision of a man, of the invisibility. Within yourself, you can dream a new world with the new ideas and a new dream. the outer world is just a consequence of what you are. Then, if you read the newspapers and you watch the TV and all the news coming from the outer world, you really can believe that the world is a disaster. And I tell you, the world is as it is because you are as you are, you yourself. And we can change the world, changing ourselves. You cannot do it outside yourself. Many revolutions have been in the past, for thousands of years. People killing each other, wars, conflicts, but we didn't change anything. And in the future, we cannot change anything because the outer world is just a projection. Do you understand? It's just a projection. The outer world is something that is created and invented in your own being, in your own dream. And we have to learn how to dream differently, how to think, feel differently. And you will see that the world around will change. This is the individual revolution. There is no other revolution. You have to change yourself. You want to become rich? There is no sin. You want to buy a beautiful building? You have to dream differently. You have to dream that world, that house, that woman, that man, that family. You have to dream it and not to desire it. We confuse desire with dream. And that's why we never get what we want. If you understand what desire means, then and what dream means, you will see that you can conquer things which are impossible. This is what our students are studying. Mainly, they are studying themselves. They are turning towards themselves and see what is happening within. Because what is happening within is happening without. Then it's difficult to intervene on the outer world because the outer world is just a projection. You have to intervene on yourself, within yourself. And you will see that there you will find the way how to change and transform things. The slightest change within yourself will move mountains in the outer world, in the outer events. This is something that we forgot. This is a secret, very simple secret that we forgot. Then we speak about crisis, about war, terrorism, and all those things. But I tell you, if you don't change yourself, you will find always yourself in something terrible. Because you are believing in something that is not the very cause of what is happening. Conflicts, wars, and terrorism is within you. If you change within, the world without has to change. You will never get into any conflict or war.
Извините, господин Диана, время, извините.
Oh, sorry. Okay,
I'm sorry. time is running out.
I don't think that what I'm talking about is out of the theme. I think that we should understand that there are great speakers here. That you have to understand that you cannot conquer anything in the outer world if you don't have this self-observation and self-conquest. Only if you conquer yourself, within yourself, you will create an incredible world, and you can achieve incredible things. I thank you very much.
Спасибо, господин Дана.
Thank you, Mr. Dana. That's what we are doing. We are searching for potentials in changes, positive changes.
Кто-то хочет прокомментировать или высказать?
Does anyone want to comment and have a say on this?
Спасибо. А мы пойдем дальше по нашим проблемам.
We shall move on, and now let's give the floor to Raiv Konstantin, describing problems in creating the transparent and efficient market of stressed assets.
Доброе утро, уважаемые друзья,
Good morning, esteemed colleagues and friends.
коллега с первого ряда.
As a colleague from the first row said, I'm very much impressed, first by the first speaker, because we have the same ideas, actually. We have to be proactive, one have to believe in something, to make changes, starting with yourself, instead of blaming everything on the bad world. And one has to be realistic.
С точки зрения выступления
As for
Стефана или Диана, конечно,
Stefan Delana's, the Italian style,
тактичность,
his tact and creativity
отчасти близка
are very appealing
российскому менталитету.
to Russian mentality.
Все любим итальянские
We
товары,
all love
но,
Italian
к сожалению или к
goods.
счастью, мы не
Fortunately,
научились там
unfortunately, we are incapable of
То, что
mimicking
мир
them.
стоит на грани, да, то есть
So
вот
the world
последние,
is at the verge.
которые происходят
You
там
know,
в той же,
the last events happening in China
в общем-то,
show that the world is
на
changing.
сегодняшний день там строить там долгосрочные перспективы,
And
безусловно, можно, но
one certainly can make long-term prospects, but at these turbulent times, it's very difficult to make serious,
более-менее там
reliable
долгосрочные
forecasts
перспективы.
for longer time horizons.
Меня пригласили в качестве
I was
эксперта
invited here as an
по
expert
российскому рынку, поскольку мы
in the
действительно
Russian
занимаемся,
market because
продажей разных сегментов.
we make sales in different
И,
segments.
тезисы мои, они относительно
And I shall speak about
создания эффективного рынка
creating an efficient market
с точки зрения там стрессовых активов.
for
И
stressed
что мы
assets.
понимаем под стрессовыми активами?
What do we mean by distressed assets?
На самом деле, в общем-то, есть несколько там постулатов.
There are several
Первое,
postulates.
это, в общем-то,
The first, or
чтобы
criteria.
осветить, это какой рынок есть сейчас,
So first I would like to describe the current market, what kind of market it is, who sells, who is selling, how they sell, at what price,
есть ли проблемы,
are there any
результаты,
issues, what are the results,
что мы видим, что мы предлагаем.
what do we observe,
Давайте,
what do we
может,
propose, because anyone can
вы предложите лучше.
criticize, but could you come up with
Поэтому,
something better?
Следующий слайд,
Therefore, the next slide.
собственно,
shows, well, we believe that distressed assets have problems. Bankruptcy issues, court bailiffs coming to you, arresting staffs, taking them out and selling your goods. But we have a different view, a broader view on this. The problems associated with owners, when partners have conflicts between them. There's no difference compared with situation when the asset is still green, in the green and positive zone, but some facilities are collateralized, some properties are collateralized, and the owner cannot pay for it, either physical entity or a company. Well, the percentage payment, the interest payment loan is too difficult. This situation might be somewhat easier than the first one, but still it's difficult. And the third global situation, any non-core assets that many companies have, not only state corporations have them. Well, the assets that do not yield money, do not yield profit, only generate losses, like taxes, salaries, servicing, utilities, security, maintaining the operations of the company, especially in regions with low temperatures and temperature differences. So if you speak about distressed assets, we perceive it that these are most assets possessed by legal entities or individuals. Nowadays, money is an asset and real estate is a liability. Look at Tverskaya Street. It's a good street, expensive street. You see only inscriptions, rent and sale, rent and for sale. The only survivals are the companies that can make up for their losses from other projects. How do they sell? Unfortunately, we have to say that everything is sold, well, in a non-transparent way. One wants to have more certainty, more guarantees. Now everything is sold in a non-transparent way, as I said. There are facilities, there are properties, and they're sold. Formally, there are competitive bids, but nobody comes. There is only one participant. There is no advertising, and you'll never know what is sold. As I said, there's no advertising. The results of transactions are not published, so everything is very closed. Unfortunately, we are not yet out of the shadow. Who sells? So by bankruptcy managers, by court bailiffs, during the bankruptcy procedures. The sellers are the companies that generate power generating companies who deal with oil and gas, but they're not specialists in this. So they deal with oil and gas, and they're not specialists in real estate. Therefore, I can claim that the properties are sold by non-professionals. How much they have to pay? We as professional sellers, we understand that the price is established during competitive bidding procedures. Whether if it's only 1 ruble, if there is a great demand, the property will be sold. If you're selling a calculator which costs 50 rubles and you ask 100 rubles, nobody will buy it. You can ask 60 or 70, but nobody will buy it. But if you ask 30, people will come and say, and he will say, maybe I shall be lucky, like in a lottery and they can buy it cheap. That's what the business is based on. It's competition that allows us to raise the price of assets. But if we inflate the price of the assets compared with the real price, it will not result in anything good. So if there is a bankruptcy or you're under bankruptcy procedures, if you're selling non-core assets, if the price is originally wrong, you should not be afraid that it is underestimated. Well, the price might be not high, but there is broad advertising. All potential investors shall be attracted and the price will go up. But if we overestimate the facility, if we ask too high a price, that will frighten away the potential buyers.
Вот, собственно, статистика официальная.
Official statistics.
Емкость рынка.
Here we see it. Market capacity, approximate market capacity.
Реалистичен рынок стрессовых активов.
The realistic market of distressed assets.
Ну вот, если мультипликатор 2 включить сюда.
If we use the multiplier of 2, that will be 15 trillion per year.
Это нормально.
That's a good figure, a realistic figure. But if we sell at 2% of efficiency, it's not interesting. We have to pay taxes. It's good for the state, but it's not efficient for the owner. Now summing up the problems that I mentioned already. The market is huge. It's a gray market. The managers, the owners, are not professionals in sales. The inflated prices affect the efficiency of sales. The efficiency of sales leaves much to be desired. Why does it happen? Because there's a stereotype in people's minds that distressed assets, well, have associated problems. They're not good, they're cheap. Just don't go there because you'll have problems. Me, as a sailor, I do not care, but as a buyer, I don't care either where I shall buy it. Whether the private owner sells it in the bankruptcy procedures or court bailiffs are selling it, if I'm interested in the property, I shall buy it. There's an illusion in our heads that it's a problem-associated property. How does it differ from an ordinary property? It's profitable for the sellers, but for the buyer, it doesn't make any difference. The buyer doesn't care. If he's interested in the property and he's happy about the price, he will buy it. For a creditor and for the owner, well, people keep saying that you do not pay your loan and you have problems with it. But what's the difference? How does it differ from a normal, from an ordinary property? If an intermediary buys it and then resell it, there'll be no problem then. Why is it problematic now? There's no problem at all. But indecent, malafide vendors make profit on it. They claim they have they have associated problems, and they cannot be expensive, and you have to sell cheap. So we're selling two properties. So we sold the entrance and the premises. The entrance, the staircase, attracted 25 participants. In addition to the real buyer, there were 24 scoundrels who were trying to make money out of it. But it is not the vendor's problem. It's the problem of the owner. So if you sell the candies loose, they cannot cost much. But if you pack them beautifully, you put them into a beautiful box and wrap them, that will be expensive and then nice to buy. But if you're selling trash goods, they will cost kopecks. They will cost nothing. So, what do we see? Well, responding to criticism and the question, what are you suggesting? You can see all the advice here. That is advertising, good advertising, providing good information about the property, well, properly arranged lots, and the price that will be a driver. Well, when the buyer comes to the auction, the buyer wants to buy cheaper and the vendor wants to sell more expensive. During the bidding process, the price goes up. What has to be done? So we have to get to make the distress assets of the negative attitude. It's a medical term, though. Well, whenever we keep saying that your property is bad, there is negative, everything is negative, but there's nothing negative about it. It's just normal, good. Nothing happens with it. It doesn't depend whether it's collateralized, whether it's private asset, or during the bankruptcy procedures. It makes no difference. You have to sell it as a liquid commodity, make it attractive for investors. Sometimes we have to make bundling of properties because it is interesting, it is appealing, because a potential buyer wants to buy a whole building, for instance. But instead of buying one room, but there's good demand, it makes sense to make several lots. If the market is low, you have to unbundle it, divide it into sections, and sell them in the retail way. So we discussed the price. Again, broad advertising. Public auctions have to be organized the way it should be. Not just formal auctions, when we have one or two participants, two participated and one bought. Everything is in accordance with the law and everything is clean, so to say. But it depends on the buyer. So what's the situation now? If we had a high market, it would make sense to wait. And we recommend to all owners, if you have no great necessity to sell now, you should wait. But unfortunately, I can give you an example from my own practice. We are selling a property in St. Petersburg. It's our own property. I believe it costs so much. I invested into renovation, new communications, but there's no demand, and I understand. I have no illusions about it. A 10% discount I give a 10% discount, doesn't work. Another 15% discount doesn't work. Now the asking price is 50% down. The buyers come and look and buy. But I needn't buy now. But if I need money, I have to buy, because at the falling market, it makes no sense to wait under certain illusions. Martin said that you have to be realistic. It's good.
This is absolutely correct. We don't need any illusions. We shouldn't think that tomorrow it will be cheaper. Why so? There are no grounds to predict that this real property will be more expensive. And what's happening now? If we want to discount things, we try to work fast. But due to some bureaucratic procedures and agreements, coordination. It takes up too long. Companies normally coordinate, negotiate things for long. I mean, all sales, prices, and so on. So what about taxes, and what about the salaries of the people servicing this real property? And what about the utilities? No one counts these costs. And sometimes, what will happen to new owners? Will they be efficient or not? Sorry, I'm pressed for time. So, let me give you several examples, including the cases from my practice. The first situation, this happened with the site belonging to a former tram and mechanical plant. It was a bankrupt enterprise, and however, for us, any asset, no matter where it is distressed or normal, we try to get maximum effect. And no matter how many people participate in this deal. Thank you for your attention. Sorry for exceeding the time frames, and I'm ready to answer any of your questions. Thank you. Your questions, please. Microphone, please. Please use the microphone. Microphone, please. Please use the microphone. Sorry, I can't hear the question. Well, if this real property has not been sold, no one will get money. And why? No, if no money, if no payment is made, nothing will happen. And if the buyer is a bankrupt, and if he tries to sell his non-core assets, what will happen to the buyer? So probably the buyer, if there are some more circumstances, probably the buyer may lose these assets, and he will only have some guarantees instead. Theoretically, anything is possible, but practically, we have an official register of Russian real estate. We know everything about property, but what if some third parties have claims for this property? Well, this may happen in different cases, for instance, when selling some private property and so on. There is a law on bankruptcy, and there's a register of bankrupts too. And if you are registered, it's one thing. In other cases, there may be different court rulings, and you can't guarantee that you will escape it. For instance, if you are a private owner and you want to sell your assets, under some circumstances, the court ruling may forbid this. Theoretically, this may happen. So does it mean that the buyers are always under risk? If the information is closed, it's really dangerous. But if the information is open, there's no risk. It will be just a normal product. Thank you. Now, let me give the floor to the representative of Russian Ministry of Construction. Let me be very brief. Here are two main ideas. First, we can't talk only about investment into real estate in Moscow and Moscow region. We should talk about the whole Russia. And second, let's not focus only on ultra profit. Right now, even considering the lower purchasing power and the situation with the housing sector, well, if we consider all programs that are underway in Russia now, the income of 20% will always be in force. Why so? Well, because investing into real estate is a good alternative to deposits and other investment tools. And as to launching new buildings and dynamics, it's also it's under question. And many people have negative predictions. But last year, it was an unprecedentedly high figure, and the figure predicted for this year will also be extremely high, about 1 million. So irrespective of the economic situation and irrespective of the decline of mortgage lending, the volume of commissioned buildings is very high, and besides, the mortgage lending system is in decline only in the market of secondary housing. The bonds are becoming increasingly important now in all Russia. When houses are constructed, it means that the people reside there and pay for the utilities. Yes, the income of investors will not be high, but still it will be stable, irrespective of inflation and other factors. If you want to invest into a site, and if you want to equip it with the technical infrastructure, you will have lots of suppliers. They will compete. All developers now are afraid to buy a pig in a poke, and no one knows how long it will take to install all facilities and to establish the infrastructure on his site, because bureaucratic procedures take up too long. Therefore, we should talk about developing the whole infrastructure, including the social system, all technical facilities, and so on. So I would request you to look at some Russian regions like the Far East or the east of Russia. In about 2 or 3 years, I think it will be, if you invest there, you can forecast your profit, you can plan it, and everything will be very transparent. And I think Moscow and St. Pete are not the only possible regions for investors. I can answer your questions. I'm ready to answer your questions. Do you have them? Questions, please. When starting your presentation, you said that if you invest into state-supported real property, the income will total about 20%. So why do you think the government aims to reduce the price of 1 square meter of economy class housing? No, I think the document states that the cost will go down by 20% due to the reduced offer, reduced volume of construction. The production cost remains unchanged, but the profit changes, and some crooky investors used to earn on that. So that's what we do. We try to reduce the cost and prices of economy class housing. Do you mean that you can offer some competitive price that will be equal to the market price after the construction has been completed? No, I mean the price, your selling price. The government now supports only the construction of economy class houses. And as to the social and technical infrastructure, they support it too. And when you sell this property, you will have guaranteed income. So does it apply to developers? Or certainly the developers, not the investing consumers. The consumer investors can be subdivided into 2 categories. The first one only invests money, and the second category want to improve their life conditions. So this applies to the second category. Other questions, please? Thank you. Tell me, please. The previous speaker convincingly demonstrated that our market is still in the shadow, especially this applies to prices and the market situation, including taxes. So what about your ministry? Do you plan any measures to reduce the shadow part of this market and market operations? Well, you know, I think the government should not interfere with the market relations, with the sales operations, be them shadow or not shadow operations. But our development institute and the fund of support to housing construction, they know everything. And even if there are shadow operations, these are all speculations. Some companies accuse us that we missed something 10 years ago. I think we have special bodies that should be in charge of shadow operations and so on. But our work, and I represent the Development Institute, and we work with a variety of sites, so our operations are transparent. So the role of Construction Ministry of Russia in the cadastral value, cadastral price, and there are several appraisal methods. So the Ministry of Construction at some point distracted and could not regulate the market. But it's a real market, I agree. I'm not saying that you should interfere with operations, but I'm talking about statistics. The market participants do not know what's happening there, and the information on prices and pricing that the Ministry of Construction submits to us come from unknown sources, and this is not normal. If we talk about pricing and the pricing, and it's based on resources. If we talk the prices of construction, this is one thing. If we talk about the prices of square meters, that's another thing. There's a complicated formula. And it depends on the type of real estate, whether it is primary or secondary housing. And also it depends on construction costs. The current average price per square meter is 36 rubles, 1,000 rubles. Well, now there are some. The Ministry of Construction has established some prices that are lower than average prices, and this applies to economy class houses. So they are supported heavily by the budget. And now, but it's not profitable for developers, and many developers choose not to participate in some bidding procedures. There are very tough standards. There's a subtlety here. None of Moscow and Moscow region do not participate in any of federal programs, though the costs of construction are the same everywhere, be it Moscow or the city of Tver or Kaluga, excluding the cost of a site, land plot. Thank you. Just one small question. Microphone, please. Please, microphone. Use the microphone, please. Sorry, I can't hear the question. Let me now answer your question. The production cost is really so, but there are construction costs and there are investment costs. If we take Moscow region, we can see that some real property sells better in the crisis time, and this is what we should do further. There are several companies in Moscow region that sell some objects for economy prices, and their profit is up to 20%. They create a good environment. They develop territories, including the infrastructure, playgrounds for children, and so on. And later on, this helps them to to increase selling prices up to 200%.
So the guy is saying that some developer buys land plots which are very cheap. That makes the cost of construction cheaper. And naturally, the flats sold there are much cheaper. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Now I give the floor to Olga Ogorodova from Department of Investment Policy of Private-Public Partnership from the Ministry of Economic Development. A good day, esteemed colleagues. There's something I would like to speak about. In the current economic situation, one of the efficient mechanisms to raise private investments is PPP. What is it? Private-public partnership. So I'll go over to my presentation. So what documents have been adopted? Starting from the beginning of this year, we enacted the law on PPP. It's a federal law. Earlier, it was regulated only by the law on concessions. Somebody might know it, whereas the PPP law expands the financial and legal ways of using this mechanism by providing the chance to have properties privately owned. The world practices have about 12 different models like BOT, BOOT, etc. But now we have the PPP. Let's compare PPP with the state order. We are accustomed that investments are traditionally raised into infrastructural projects. This is done through the government or public order. Whereas PPP is long-term projects, and during this period, the state will give over the investor the right to provide a certain service to the population. The investor builds and operates the facilities, and the payback to the investor is taken out of the charges for the services provided to the people. For instance, for healthcare services, or partially it comes from the joint financing by the state. So another positive feature compared with the state order is that the state can delegate the risks to the investors. And there are significant risks, such increase of the cost estimates, so delayed commissioning of the property, etc. The investor is interested, has an interest not to exceed the cost of the estimate of expenditures, because he will have to cover all these exceeds. There is the distribution of risks and responsibility, and this allows to cut costs for construction and ensure the efficient provision of services, but it can create and attract new management technologies, because the PPP object envisages operating of the facility after the end of its construction. What is the law on the PPP? It provides details describing the interaction between the parties, the public and the private actors. First, about the positive sides, the pros for the state. This is the legitimacy of the projects, because, as we know, the regions already have the law, a similar law. But looking at the Perm Oblast experience, we see that these projects can be recognized illegitimate and be turned over to state order facilities or state agency construction. Another pro is that in addition to the main contract during the competition, there is also private initiative involved. I'll speak about it in more detail at the end. This private initiative provides an alternative mechanism for signing contracts without having to have a bidding procedure. There might be a joint bidding procedure or competition procedure when you have to build 15 schools, for instance. But investors do not want to sign individual contracts. That is, the funding organizations are prepared to sign agreement for the whole number of facilities of schools, and there might be several investors involved. Why is it good for investors? Again, the public part can participate in the project by direct financing, through subsidies, through material participation, for instance, providing land or forest plots, and the financing can be made through budget subsidies, which is a very simple instrument or a mechanism, and the budget code has been accordingly adjusted. The law provides for the possibility to allocate a plot of land, of forest or water in the framework of unified bidding procedures without having to have a special procedure. The law envisages the selection of investors on the basis of private initiatives. As I already said, the parties to PPP agreement so, as I said, first of all, the purpose is to attract investors into different projects, infrastructural projects, and the list is much broader now compared with concession agreements. There are, first of all, privileged facilities. There is housing facilities, housing properties. Under Law 225, where they have a different list of objects, including social purpose properties, healthcare facilities. Let me describe the overall procedure for the selection of investors. Well, now an offer is made about the project implementation. It can be made by the private party or by the public party. then this offer is discussed by the public party during 90 days, and then the public takes 180 days to look at the project. It might seem a long time, but we have to avoid errors in subsequent implementation. As for private initiative in law 224, and why is it useful? No, let me say something else about assessment of efficiency. Ministry of Economic Development designed the order on the methodology of assessing efficiency of performance, like assessing the performance for the social economic effect, for the output. And after this, they compare advantages with the state order mode and the PPP, and the authorized body, that's the Ministry of Economic Development, so at the regional level, they have also a regional authority which has to take a negative or a positive opinion about the project. If it is negative, the project is not to be implemented, so it's given up. Now, getting back to private initiative again. Private initiative is different from the private initiative envisaged in concessional agreements. Over there, it is more regulated and envisages all forms of involvement of the private investors. So the private investor can make the first step, unlike the current practices. And now it is a great step forward. All calculations should comply with the respective methodology. It is one of the tools that allows to curtail competition or bidding procedures. If there are no other interested parties, you can skip certain stages, preliminary stages of project preparation. So, if there are no other investors, there might be a direct agreement signed. The selection of investors. Sorry. That seems to be all about the general ideas. And if you have some questions, I can answer them. So you're welcome to ask questions. Good morning, Red Group Company. You said that in contrast to concessional agreements, there are forms of PPP wherein the private investor can come up with its initiative. As far as I know, the law does not directly describe such forms. There's a general definition and general conditions of what a PPP agreement should include. Or maybe you can tell us in more detail about all these forms of participation. Probably you have some regulatory programs, because the law does not describe such forms directly, because they might be different with the foreign modes. At the federal level, if you speak about the mechanism of PPP implementation, the federal level has only two concessional agreements, which started in 2005, and starting from this year, there is a PPP agreement. So these are the two forms of PPP implementation. It contains different sub-forms that are used worldwide. Since there is the possibility of sharing construction costs, operation and technical maintenance by the private investor. It is possible that in future the facility, the property will become the ownership of, shall be owned by the private investor, which did not exist before and was a restriction in this case. Do I understand correctly that the specific type of what is included in the PPP agreement is individual? Yes, it's individual, it's a case-by-case basis. The law outlines mandatory things that should be contained therein, like mandatory participation of a private partner, partial or full financing, construction, reconstruction of the facility, and potential inclusion of additional elements, either by the state or by the investor. These are the mandatory things. Well, the law started operating this year. Do you have any, the first applications or the first agreements discussed in the government? Such models are being implemented already. There are some projects implemented at the regional level. But the law also has some provisional items. For instance, municipal projects should be brought in line with the federal law. All the legal background that we have now is prepared and became effective. The Ministry of Economic Development came up with bylaws regulating certain procedures like appraisal, monitoring, and control of project implementation. There are no new applications starting from January of this year. No new applications. But as far as we know, the market is ready for it. And private initiative will be actively used. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. A private case. I'm from Novosibirsk, and Novosibirsk has a great demand of hostels. We have a land plot which is owned by the Federation, and we would like to use the PPP mode to build a hostel there. Probably some of the territory will be given over to the private investor, and the Minister of Education told us that the legal background does not allow us to do so for several reasons. It being federal property, there are some restrictions. Concessions are no good in this case. So my question is, do you have any experience in implementing such facilities as hostels in Russia using PPP mechanism? And probably the Ministry of Economy has a clear scheme on how to use, what scheme should be used with such a restriction, because the site is owned by the state. So we want advice. In practice, if the facility and the land plot have different owners, then the object has to be transferred. So you mean you have to build the property and it will be turned over to the region? No, we want to have it as a federal property. So the hostel should be owned by the state. But the investor shall have the right of management, for instance, to have a shop or a business center for students. So they will have some commercial acreage. That depends on the structure of the project. And if you know the main conditions under which you are going to implement the project, this tool can be used. if it complies with the structure of the transaction, if it is to be in federal property, in federal ownership, you might use a concession. If it is to be privately owned, it might be PPP. You have to know the structure of the deal in more detail. I wanted to know, do you have any experience? Not about hostels, no. The Minister of Education says concession is no good for us. Not that I know about such experience. Try to be brief if you can. Yes, I have a brief question. I'm Zhdanov. Thank you for your presentation. My question might be most interesting to investors when they're switching over to this form. Is it possible to participate in project preparation? Because during the state order procedure, the private investors are not invited. So how broad will be the involvement of the potential investor into the process? Or shall you use the typical way or typical standard documents will be provided? You know, investors have great fantasies, and they might come up with, if something is non-standard, that will procrastinate the time horizons. We have open possibilities for participation of the investors in the project. And the public party can participate at the discussion at a later stage.
This proposal certainly has restrictions in terms of its form, and the NPV is to exceed 0. But I think this is an adequate requirement for a project. And also, it should comply with more than one social program. As to this is similar to the system of state procurement, but this is a subject for another discussion. They also have risks, and the PPP project, at least we thought so, and our experiments, our attempts prove that too. Since we delayed the launch of our group, let me now give the floor to Mikhail Grin, representing the National Agency of Housing Funds. Well, when I was listening to the presentation, I kept looking at Arsen, and today we spoke about the things that are well known worldwide, that are often used, but only the current situation made us look at the tools. We today discussed how to sell more and for better prices. The previous speaker mentioned that we had everything to do it, including the law on public and private partnership. The representative of the ministry said today that the federal authorities and the government were ready to cooperate with us. And it was even yesterday, it was difficult to imagine that a civil servant like that, representing a governmental agency, would participate in this type of event and actively and informally talk to investors and others. So I was extremely interested to listen to this discussion. Thanks a lot to the facilitators of this section and the sector-based management institute. Thanks a lot to Russian Academy of Civil Service. So let me say a few words about Mr. Vermeulen's presentation and our cooperation. I talk to Martin about once a month, so we keep in touch regularly. And RIX is the oldest agency of this type. It's 160 years old, and Martin has mentioned that too. It's over 118 members, and but so probably there are 300 investors. But how many people do we need? How many investors do we need? So I was listening to Martin's presentation very attentively. He spoke about economic, political factors and the openness of information. These are the three pillars, I think, to attract investors to Russia. And indeed, today, Moscow region and St. Pete are expanding, and if we add up these 3 units, so what would be our income if we add them all up? The population of these places total about 1/5 of the total Russian population. This is a very big disproportion, and certainly we should change it, and we should follow the research. Martin mentioned several times that we didn't have a proper dialogue with the government, but now we can see that we can meet a minister easily or some representative of the State Duma. And then Martin wondered, and now what impedes your development? Well, probably there are still many obstacles, and we should first, we already have the dialogue between the business and authorities. This slide shows the symbols of the 2 biggest events in business and real estate. The first one is MIPIM in the Cannes and Expo Real in Munich. These are the 2 exhibitions and forums, and these are the platforms to demonstrate our achievements. They are really the key events in the global real estate. So here you can see the dates of these events, and we know now that the volume of launching and commissioning new houses is growing. For instance, in Moscow, it's 3.5 million square meters of new housing. But so the construction has been accelerated. But what we need now is new tools to use and to sell this real estate. But we actively participate in all events, and Mr. Recession participated, and the minister who spoke here today also participated in these events. We actively talk to overseas investors. So you are very welcome to come here. And do you know many people who acquired real estate in Bulgaria? And how many Bulgarians that acquired real estate in Russia? How many Russian people bought real estate in the UAE? And vice versa? Let's compare these figures. And let's try to enhance the competitiveness of investment into Russian real estate. 95% of all investment into Russian real estate is done by Russians. It's our domestic investors. We export many products like linen, like raw materials, and so on. But we need to learn how to sell our real estate too. One of our key partners is the Trade and Industrial Chamber of Russia, and we resolved to organize the first International Business Forum of Property in June 2016. It was announced at the Open Economic Forum, and we have already done lots of preparatory work. Now, about 10 risk managing investors have revealed their interest in this event, and in total we are inviting about 30 countries. The Ministry of Construction today mentioned that we could make a list of finished sites with the infrastructure, with the network of that were ready for construction. Someone mentioned the NPV today, which is to be higher than zero. So we're preparing many projects already for this event, and we participate in about 10 negotiations monthly. But we can't so far make a final conclusion on the income, how much it will be in rubles. How much is land? How much is connection to all networks? Someone needs to make preparatory calculations. The sellers do not make them. They want investors to make these calculations. But this is not... It's incorrect. Developers are often willing to take land, but they are renting it, but they don't want to buy it. This is so now we are building the so-called land bank. This situation is unacceptable for foreign investors now. Let me conclude, and I would like you to understand it. Thanks a lot to our international colleagues for supporting us and coming to this forum, to our section on this winter day. We have spoken about money today. One of the co-chairs of this whole event represents the Central Bank of Russia. This is Alexander Torshin. Today we have spoken about public and private partnership. This is very efficient, but we also need some form of state support. We need new multipliers. Mr. Resen, he is chairman of the expert commission, and he is on the jury of Prix d'Excellence competition. He is also a co-chair of the new forum. So what will be the mission of the forum? The mission is to find new investors, to invite international investors, and once the model is developed, liquidity and profit will be enhanced too. Elena and I have just decided that we needed a special section on advertising, and Elena is ready to assist in that. She represents the chair of advertising. Our target audience currently is about 26 regions of Russia. I'm sorry, but we are exceeding our time frames. Well, we started with a delay, so probably we will finish this section later too. I'm sure that it's the most important subject. We really need to sell the property that was built in 2015. Now we already have 60 million of new construction. It's 60 million square meters, and but the demand is bigger. But we're ready to construct more. We only want to sell new property. Thanks a lot to the forum. We're always ready for communication. You're welcome to call the Trade and Industry Chamber and us directly. So we're open to your proposals. We want it to be useful. Thanks a lot. Thank you too. We are drawing to a close, and I hope our section has been interesting. We have revealed some topical and serious issues. We hope that we will find some ways and some tools and use them. Thanks a lot once again, and see you again.